Director here at B.E.S.T, and I am so excited for you to be with us today and for me to introduce my panelists to you today. Today, we are going to talk about how transparency builds trust. And I am fortunate enough to have two of my favorites on this subject here with me today. I've got Nicole Solas, who is a mom of two in Rhode Island. And I can't wait for her to share her story if you haven't heard that yet. But when she enrolled her daughter in kindergarten, her school district publicly threatened to sue her for submitting public records requests about critical race theory and gender theory. So she'll tell you more about that here shortly. And then we have Matt Beienburg, who is the director of the Van Sittert Center for Constitutional Advocacy and the director of education policy for the Goldwater Institute, and lives here in Arizona alongside me. So thank you both for being here. I can't wait to jump in. And we're going to start with Nicole. If you can just tell us what in the world happened to you when you were just trying to find out what your daughter was going to be taught in kindergarten. What happened to you and how that's evolved into where you are today?
Sure. So I enrolled my daughter in kindergarten. It's the first time enrolling my child in school. She's my firstborn, so I wanted to know what she was learning, and in particular, if she would learn about critical race theory or gender theory. My school didn't post curriculum, even though they are supposed to by Rhode Island law. They're supposed to have it available for inspection. So I had no way of doing this on my own. I had to call the school and ask what they would learn. I also asked for a tour. They wouldn't give me a tour, even though they were in fact giving tours throughout COVID. And I was essentially unable to know what she was learning or get a tour, meet a teacher. I was just expected to drop my daughter off at school and have no idea what the inside of the building looked like or who her teachers were. They did tell me that they were teaching gender theory by not calling kids boys and girls, by embedding the values of gender identity into the classroom, and they wouldn't use gendered terminology. Critical race theory, they were teaching a certain line of thinking about American history, but they wouldn't tell me what that was. They could only say that in kindergarten, they asked kids what could have been done differently on Thanksgiving. So these were all red flags to me, and my school told me that if I wanted more information, that I had to submit public records requests. I tried calling them, I tried emailing them, and everyone at the school told me to submit public records requests. And when I did submit hundreds of public records requests, because it was literally like one question at a time, I would have to pay to receive information from these public records requests. My school got very mad that I used public records requests the way it should be used, which is whenever you have a question, that's how they told me to. They turned around, put my name on the agenda of a public school committee meeting and threatened to sue me. So they had a whole school board meeting all about me, and they spent 5 hours discussing my moral character. They discussed openly what they think my political leanings were. They let people call me racist. The school itself called me racist. It was more like a show trial than a school committee meeting. And again, I did exactly what they told me to do, right? Submit public records requests. I then got a lot of media on my side. I exposed them for being the bullies that they were. They didn't want to tell me what was being taught in school. It backfired on them. And I thought it was over, but then 2 months later, the teachers union did sue me. And they're suing me for submitting those same public records requests that my school, again, told me to submit. So it's now been 7 months. I still don't have answers to my questions. I'm in litigation. The Goldwater Institute is representing me. And here I am now. I never could have imagined that just asking my school what they were going to teach my kindergartner would end up in a lawsuit, would end up in a show trial. It's just astounding.
It is. And I just saw you on the new documentary, right? Whose children are they? That was the first time I had seen any footage of that. That was the board meeting, right, that you were in. And so I'm just so thankful as a mom of 6 myself for you standing up and sharing your story and helping us across the country, because this is not in any way, shape, or form acceptable at what our school districts across the country are doing to parents. And so, Matt, obviously, because of Nicole's story and even what I've experienced here in Scottsdale, Arizona, why do we need academic transparency legislation? Why has it gotten to this point, right, where we need legislation to help parents see what's being taught in our schools?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it has gotten to this point, but it obviously has. And as Nicole mentioned, laws in Rhode Island, state laws across the country, and federal law is very clear that parents are supposed to have the right to inspect the materials that are being used for their kids' instruction. That's a pretty basic, standard to say, yeah, these are public schools. It shouldn't be controversial to say, let's make sure that the parents can know what's going to be presented to their students. And yet in practice, what we've seen, and Nicole's example is obviously a perfect one, that in practice, parents don't have a meaningful way to actually exercise these rights. So sure, the school may say, or the state or the feds may say, you have this right to do it. But then when it comes to a real mom trying to find out for her daughter what's being taught, you see something like that, where they're told you need to submit public records requests. And we've seen this across the country, not just in her case, but of if you go to a school and say, we'd like to know, what's being taught. We've had examples of parents testifying on transparency bills around the country, saying exactly the same thing. They went to the teacher, they tried to ask what curriculum is being used, and the teacher says, you need to go talk to the principal. And the principal says, you need to go talk to the school board or the superintendent. And then they send, well, it's up to the teacher actually to determine what's being used. And it's kind of this runaround where in some cases the schools are saying, we're already fully transparent. You can go and see our curriculum, you can see our state standards. But those are broad topic outlines. Those don't really tell parents what are the actual materials that are being used. And content, the 1619 project from the New York Times is a prime example that's being used in all 50 states, thousands of classrooms. And as folks like Real Clear Politics have done investigations on this, it's mostly being used as supplemental materials, right? In most cases, you don't see a school board that says, we are officially adopting this. They just give the principals or their curriculum coaches or the teachers authority to essentially slip that into the classroom. And so if a parent has concerns about that kind of material and wants to know, is this school using it, they're given the runaround. So academic transparency, these laws such as in Arizona and around the country would say, if you're using the material, we need to make sure that this is disclosed to parents in a way that's actually easy enough for parents to access that. So putting that material online, as a lot of great schools and great teachers already do, submitting lesson plans on Google Classroom or using Blackboard, making sure that content is posted, that it's online, and so that current and prospective parents and even other teachers in other schools and districts can see what's being used so that they can all benefit from this.
Exactly. But what about the myth that this is just going to put teachers over the edge, right? We do know that teachers are overworked and they're stressed. What about that narrative out there that this is just going to cause teachers to leave the profession?
Yeah, the teachers' unions are pushing this narrative hard in the same way that they and groups like the ACLU and the media are saying that if you posted the materials online, that's going to censor what we're allowed to teach, because suddenly if parents knew what was being taught, they might object, and that's going to make it harder for the schools to push it. But when it comes to this argument about it being too difficult for teachers, again, these bills don't say you have to plan out all of your materials in advance at the start of the year. Just as you go, then disclose what you use. And again, in the same way that we've seen teachers themselves writing op-eds, testifying around the country and saying, look, I'm already documenting my materials either on these lesson plans, or the teachers themselves don't start over each year from scratch. They kind of keep track of what's being used. And importantly, very much to the opposite of this being an extra burden for teachers, we've seen a lot of teachers write and comment on this, that especially new teachers coming into the system, they're often sort of thrown to the wolves and told, you need to build your class syllabus from the ground up now, and given very little guidance. And so we've seen teachers come out and saying, actually, it would be a huge help if we could see, hey, what are the great quality schools around in my area, in the state? What are they using to teach these same subjects? And maybe we can help replicate that and use it, rather than spending, as teachers themselves who've been surveyed in national research saying, teachers are spending hours each week just scouring the internet for material, going on Google, going on Pinterest. Teachers pay teachers, all these things just to find materials. And something like academic transparency says, let's not make you have to reinvent the wheel and search the internet. We can show you what's quality material that's being used in nearby schools by great educators.
Right. It's a win-win for everybody. And so, Nicole, back to you. What advice do you have for parents right now who have kids in the public schools or charter schools? What advice do you have for them to find out what curriculum is being used in their child's school? What would you say to them?
First, check the website, see if they posted it. And like Matt said, a lot of these standards that they're posting are very vague. That's not enough. And even if you get the curriculum, you're still not going to know about supplementary materials, about professional development sessions that they have with the teachers, and all of that informs what they're actually teaching your kids. So after you make a good faith effort to reach out to the school and say that you want to know, you want to have the curriculum sent to you, then submit public records requests. Because one criticism, one invalid criticism that parents like I get is, oh, well, you just didn't try hard enough. Well, parents need to then continue submitting public records requests to prove that they are trying very hard to get information. And we don't want to have to go to a legislative session where we're testifying for these academic transparency bills and have them say, well, did you ask the right person? You want to say, actually, I asked 300 times. I have all these public records requests to show that I can't get the information. So that's one thing parents should do. And the other thing they should do is go and testify in these sessions for academic transparency, and make sure you talk about the facts. Every sentence you say should be a fact of first this happened, then this happened. Make your case, just solid, and so that way they can't refute it. And then thirdly, know that the next step, even after you do that, it's not over. This is a long battle. We need to be having conversations with other parents as much as we can, because that's the only way that we're going to raise awareness and make this part of everyone's consciousness that we don't have academic transparency. They tell us we do. They tell us they have all these rules, but they don't work. So I just want parents to keep being active. Don't give up and don't get exhausted. Just do it day by day and make sure that you always have your finger on the pulse of what's happening, either in social media groups or in your own personal groups that you form on your own. Last thing I just want to say, another argument that parents will hear is like, oh, well, my school district in particular is transparent. My school doesn't have a problem. And that may be the case. They may not have a problem with transparency right now. But then as soon as you have elections for a new school board, that's going to change the culture. That's going to change the policies. Why do we have to wait every election to wait and see if our rights are going to be vindicated? Instead, just have academic transparency legislation that says, we don't care who's voted in, you always have to be transparent, no matter who you are and what your politics are.
That's exactly right. And what I love about B.E.S.T too is that they connect us across the country. And so for those of you who aren't connected with B.E.S.T, go to parentsknowbest.com, sign up, get on the emails. We have all kind of educational events and calls, and you can build relationships across the country, because I know you and I both testified for SB 1211 here in Arizona together, because we are seeing this across the country. This is, nationwide. So get involved in your district, in your state, and then join with us across the country so that we can learn and help each other. So Matt, lastly, what advice would you quickly have for parents before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I would just reinforce exactly what you two said. It's getting involved, recognizing that, you may feel like you're one small voice standing up to the teachers union, but as we've seen, when parents come together, when they actually say, we represent parents at large, this is what we're the ones that care most about our kids, I think that goes a long way. And I think that we're seeing the fruit of that now.
Exactly. So thank you both so much for being here with us today, for helping educate parents, empowering parents to stand up for their child and their education. So thank you so much.